Yeah, I think so. I'm still like doing things to it. Okay. 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 Thank you. Hi, you.
Mess anything up, Jay. Yeah, I'm gonna do the intro. Yeah. Oh, that light is so strong. Good evening, everyone. Hello. Welcome. On behalf of the Marine Biological Laboratory, welcome to our Falmouth Forum. Tonight we're presenting Jane Baker from our very own Falmouth High School. And I'm just here to remind you about a couple of important things. We ask that you remain masked while you're indoors and throughout the lecture. And then we, of course, friendly reminder, silence your cell phones. I also want to just take a quick moment. This is our last forum of the 2021 season year. We're going to kick off the 2022 season. That will be on January 7th, but it will be at Falmouth Academy. So for our audience, our viewers at home, we do ask that you register for that particular lecture to secure a seat at Falmouth Academy. You can find the information on our website, mbl.edu/Falmouth Forum, and also on the Falmouth Academy. That is a Falmouth Forum with Dan Moore and the New England Bell Ringers, so it's going to be really nice. So hopefully you can all join. So I would like to introduce Tucker Clark. Tucker is on our Falmouth Forum Committee, and she will be introducing our speaker this evening. Thank you.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Looking around, I think that many of you already know and admire Jane Baker, but in case you don't know her, a bit of background. Jane has been teaching visual arts for 25 years, the past 14 at Falmouth High School, from which she graduated in 1987. She received her BS in studio art from Smith College and her MS in art education from the Mass College of Art. For several years, she taught art in the Boston Public Schools, where she was selected for a one-year stint as the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum teacher in residence. But those are just credentials, and actually they're only some of Jane's credentials. Jane's expertise is in helping students expand their understanding of the world around them and of other disciplines such as math, science, and literature through visual communication. She initiates cross-discipline work with other teachers and with Woods Hole scientists. She brings her students into the Falmouth community, and the community responds with generosity. Jane lives in Woods Hole with her husband and 2 children. An artist herself, she shows her woodcuts at the Handworks Gallery in Woods Hole and the Nantucket Artists Association. She's on the board of the Printmakers of Cape Cod and is a member of both the National and the Cape and Islands Art Educators Association. Hundreds of students have benefited from Jane's energy, thoughtfulness, and attentiveness. We're lucky to get a glimpse of those tonight. Please welcome Jane Baker.
Excuse me. Hello. It's pretty exciting to take my mask off. Sorry that you can't. I'm Jane Baker. I teach visual arts at Falmouth High School. So hello to everybody here. Thank you for coming out on this cold Friday night when there's so many other wonderful things you could be doing. And thank you to the people at home who are Zooming in, again, when there's so many fascinating things you could be watching on Netflix, and you picked me, so thank you. Normally, for those of you who have seen me speak, I do need to do this. I need to set this up, and I apologize to Mike, who I promised I wouldn't let him down, and I already did. So pardon me while I do this. I have to push some buttons. And Hold on, I'm messing up the last part. Mike, I'm really sorry. Hit present floating 3 dots hide video panel. Can't find the 3 dots. I'm really sorry. Mike. Sorry, bud. Thank you very much. You would think with all the Zooming that we did last year, I'd be so savvy at all of this. And I am, but I'm passive aggressively, I don't really, after all that Zooming, I don't really do too much of it anymore. Is it not working? This would be awfully sad if this slideshow that I made doesn't show. Okay. That's not it. There it is. Are we good to go? Awesome. Hi. I'm Jane Baker, and I teach visual arts at Falmouth High School. Welcome to the Falmouth Forum. So, I really do want to thank you for being here tonight. It's actually awfully nice to be invited here as an art teacher. Normally, we art teachers don't get to come and talk to people outside of art education. Normally, we're all just sitting with each other complaining about how nobody wants to hear about art education. But you guys are here with me, and you're going to hear about it. It's going to be awesome. We are going to talk, or I am going to talk to you about the arts at the high school, but specifically about all of the science collaborations that I do with the community and with my students. There's many other projects besides that we do. For example, if you've ever been on the bike path and seen the railroad tracks behind wood lumber, those are my students. And what else? There's a few other things in town, the many other projects that we've done, but I'm specifically going to focus on the scientific interactions that we've done over the years. Otherwise, we'll be here all night. I did make notes, otherwise I talk in tangents, and my mother is sitting right in front of me, and I don't want her to get stressed out, so I'm going to try and stick to the notes. I do want to say thank you to the Falmouth Forum for inviting me to speak to you tonight. And I want to say thank you to my parents, my family, and my friends, my husband who made it here. He's sitting in the back with our son. Anyway, my principal, Mary Gans, for her unwavering support. Anything that I've ever wanted to do with the art program, Mary Gans has always said, sure, that sounds great. And she's just been a great support and a great administrator to work with. And more than anything, I do want to say thank you to the Falmouth Education Foundation, because they are the group that provides funding for most of the projects that you're going to see here tonight. What I did try to do is meticulously put their logo wherever there's a project that they have funded. So you'll see over the course of the slideshow, you'll probably think to yourself, wow, the FEF funded a lot of these projects, because they do. We do have some money in the budget for things like materials and stuff, but for me to get kids, even on a bus, to go 10 miles away from school, it costs a few $100s, and I don't have a few hundred extra dollars, and so it's really nice that the FEF is there to fund what we do. So these are the components of the presentation. I'm just going to give you a little background, who I am, besides the things that Tucker did share with you, and then the collaborations and things like that. Another shout out to the FEF. So some background. Who am I, and why do I like to bring the sciences to the classroom? Well, my parents, or our parents, always kind of kicked us out of the house when we were little. We were always at the beach. We were always in the swamp or the woods, salt pond sanctuaries. In my teenage years, my friends and I used to perhaps go under the Hui dock in our boats to see if we could find bioluminescence. We were always, mucking around doing things outdoors. So I grew up outside and enjoying that sort of thing. I also was at science school every year for a while and took all sorts of classes there, and I did spend a lot of time at Hui. So I was not a science-driven high school kid, but I was there every day after school working for Jake Pearson, who was an awesome guy. I worked in the education office, and so in doing that, I actually met a lot of scientists at that point in my life that now are grown people who have fancy jobs, and I can contact them and say, hey, do you want to do a project with us? So it was a nice connection to make back in the 80s. And then after that, I worked a couple other places at Hui with George Grice and et cetera. Anyway, more about my childhood. My two heroes of my youth, Becky Lash and Julie Child, they were two of my teachers at science school that really made learning fun, made science fun, and made art fun. I still have my original ornithology book with my studies with Becky. Becky actually comes and chaperones on my field trips now that we're more grown up. And Julie comes and lectures to my students. So there's a picture at the top there of Julie lecturing to my students, and down at the bottom, that is me in the middle with the Valley Girl skirt and the punk rocker hair, and that's a young Julie Child over on the far right. So thank you to them for all the things they taught me. Anyway, high school. High school is awful, okay? It's great for some people, but for some kids, it's not where they want to be. That sounds weird for me to say as a high school teacher because I've been teaching for so long, but for many kids, it's not a great time. This is a picture from middle school, but I keep it on my wall at the high school, and the kids usually look at it and say, what's that? And then they find out I'm in it, and I say, well, see if you can figure out who it is. It's the funniest looking kid in the picture. And every time they say, all I see is a boy in yellow pants. I'm like, that's me. So I keep it on the wall there because I think you should embrace your most awkward looking time. I want you to appreciate the yellow wide whales, and the pointy is not a bow tie. It's a strange shirt with like a pearl button. And I definitely had tissues stuffed up the sleeve because I definitely had a cold. Those are rip-off Sears sneakers. They're not Adidas. Anyway, so teenage years are awkward years. So my goals for my students, I want to make high school fun for them because for some it is fun. For some, they're the captain of the debate team and they're the captain of this and that. But for some kids, it's not their best time. So I want them to be able to give them opportunities to respond creatively. I'm not going to read this to you. You can read what's in front of you. But a lot of the art students are really strong in art, but they're not necessarily strong in other venues. And so I try to make them confident in what we're doing in art class. And then I sneak science and history and things in on the side, and then they inadvertently learn those things as well. That's my plan for them in general. Let's see. So, art class is a real class. There are some parents of some of my students that don't really think so, but mark making is visual communication. It's a way of expressing yourself to somebody else without speaking, without moving. Basically, I'm trying to follow my notes here, so sorry. Howard Gardner, he's a hero of mine. Ellen Winter, Project Zero at Harvard. Multiple intelligences, habits of mind. Howard Gardner, basically, the gist of it is, some people learn best by people talking at them like this, and some people learn best by people talking in general. Some people learn best by reading, by things. So for me personally, for example, when I was putting the slideshow together, in Google Drive, you can have things in a row or you can have things as pictures, and I always have to have them as pictures. I need to see the pictures to figure out what I want to do. If it's in rows, I get a little fritzy. So I'm a visual learner, and many of us are one kind or another or a mixture. But for many art students, they're visual learners and they need things to be brought to them at a visual level in order to comprehend things like DNA or like Shakespeare or what have you. This, by the way, is a self-portrait by Chloe Mclean. She's a senior who graduated in 2018. Oh, I did forget to say that all of the artwork that will be in the slideshow is student work from the high school. I didn't label every single piece, although I'm regretting it now because I am fussy that way. I feel like I should have put little names on each work of art. I'm sorry, I could tell you who they all are. If you ask me, who did the flowers? I can tell you who it is, but I did not label every single piece because there's a lot of it in this presentation. But within the arts, you learn perception, proportion, translating 2D into 3D. When you're looking at a three-dimensional object, your brain is taking that information and putting it into your eyeballs, into your brain, down your arm, down your hand, and so on. And it can get lost in a number of places. And the reason why people give up, the reason why people stop trying to draw is that they get frustrated with the fact that what they're trying to do doesn't look like what is in front of them. And the way that art projects go horribly wrong is that you stop looking at what you're looking at. If I say apple to all of you, you picture this red shiny apple with a stick and a little green leaf because it's a pre-schematic image that you learned to survive preschool when the kid next to you was drawing an apple and you want to draw an apple too, and you look over and like, oh, that's how you draw an apple. And then you learn how to draw a house with a box, with the windows, with the chimney, with the swirly smoke and the M-birds. These are all pre-schematic things that you learn, and your brain holds on to them as like a safety mechanism. So if you are in a class and you're trying to draw the apple in front of you, your brain just wants you to relax and draw the apple from preschool. Does that make sense? So in art class, a lot of kids will get frustrated and say, oh, I can't do this, it's not working out. So you really have to have perseverance to get through an art class and to really just have faith in your ability to see what you're doing and not draw what you think you're seeing. So in class, in the basic class, and so in Art 1 and 2, we do a lot of observational drawing because I really just want to remind kids of how to do things that they did learn in elementary school. Unfortunately, in most towns, elementary art is reduced to about 42 minutes a week at this point. It's really quite sad. They really don't have very much time in art class at all. So the things that you learn in elementary school, how to cut with scissors and how to measure things and how to use paste, how to do anything, a lot of that time is reduced so much to the point where kids don't really know how to do that. And a lot of their time at home, unfortunately, is spent on iPads and Chromebooks and things. Nobody really has a crafting corner anymore. So a lot of the basic skills that you do need in other realms of your brain, they're lost because elementary art is cut so much in many districts. Do you make room for things like MCAS? In any case, I'll get off the politics. So if you hold your pencil up to something like a shell, you can measure the angles and then hold that up to your paper and figure out what you're doing a little bit more easily. When I was little, I thought that somebody holding a pencil out to look at how to draw it, to figure out the proportions, I thought they were giving the thumbs up to what they were going to draw. I thought they were saying, like, I'm going to draw you, tree. It's going to be great. It took me a while to figure out that that's not true. So these are the things that I need my students to know. Mark-making perspective, again, I'm not going to read this to you, but these are the basic things that we go over in class and get better at in Art 1 and Art 2, because, let's see. Oh, so here's my classroom. At the bottom are typical things that we do in Art 1 and 2. Again, observational things, working with value scale, line quality, color theory. You'll notice the gear there, the top of it is very orange, the inside's very blue. Cold colors sink back, hot colors pop out. We work on little miniature acrylic landscapes. The room is always very bustling. There's between 20 and 30 people a period. I have about 120 kids a day. I wish I was a much neater person in my heart. Like, I wish I cared more about cleanliness. My friend Corinne teaches next door. Her clay room is so clean because she makes the kids clean every period, and I don't really do that. But we kind of like it that way. Anyway, so my room's always very busy, lots of things going on. Once you get through Art 1 and 2, pause for a minute. I do want to have a little bit about cell phones. Basically, kids love their phones, and if I didn't give them something to specifically do, basically if I said, oh, we're going to do sunset paintings, every single kid would pull out their phone and type in nice sunset painting on Pinterest or Google or something and just paint the stupid thing they see on their phone. And it's not that they're not thoughtful kids, it's just the phone holds everything. It does everything for you. It tells you your grades, it tells you when to wake up, it tells you, what people think of you on social media. Unfortunately, so many of them are so tuned into social media. One of my big goals is to keep them away from their phones. So anyway, once they get through Art 1 and 2, we move on to Art 3 and Honors and AP. And in those classes, that's when we do the community projects and most of the things that the FEF does sponsor and the more kind of high-level thinking projects. So this was last month, we went out to Pennakees Island for a project I'll tell you about later in the talk. And it's just good to get kids off their comfort zones, put their phones away, and make art on site. Wait, I ran into this earlier. Okay, so enough about art. Now we're going to talk about science and art. There are 3 different ways that I try and connect science and art in my classroom for my students. General topics or general projects based in scientific topics, collaborations between artists, the student artists and the scientists, and then bigger collaborations, which I'll address all of these different kinds in this talk. Let's see. I'm going to start with a kind of a funny one. This is the Charles and Ray Eames Power of 10. If you ever went to 7th grade science, you would have had to watch this really quirky 8-minute long movie. Does anybody remember this at all? So it was made in 1977. It was designed by Charles and Ray Eames for IBM, and it's to teach people about the relative scale of the universe based on the factors of 10. And so it's really heavy stuff. I was in Oakland with my family, and I lost our daughter in the Oakland Museum of Art in the Eames exhibit, and couldn't find her. And I went around a corner, and she was watching the Powers of 10 movie, and she was 12, and she was just staring at it. And I started looking at it. I was like, this would be a fun project. So I came back to Falmouth, and we decided to do a Powers of 10 self-portrait project. So each student picked a different power to do their portrait based on, and then we did the project, and we kind of moved on, and then Corona hit. Well, last week, this is awesome, Chloe Raposa and Eleanor Rosenthal, they volunteered to replicate the intro to the movie. So I made a little movie of the portraits that the kids did in 2018, but I just think it's awesome how in a half an hour on the art room floor, they just grabbed stuff from the still life table and replicated that original scene. So here is a super brief fake Powers of 10, and with apologies to the Eames office, because I hope they don't sue me for pretending this is, theirs is very fancy with this voiceover and kind of cool jingly music. But anyway, it's a good example of the projects that we do at the upper levels, where the kids are asked to take a concept and apply the skills that they learned in the lower levels. I shouldn't say lower levels, but in the Art 1 and 2. So that was going out into the universe, and now this is going down into the one cell inside the body. So some of them work, and some of them might not work, but it was still fun to do, and it was fun to challenge them to try and imagine what that is, and to try and figure out how am I going to do a self-portrait as a power of something. So that was a fun project. Oh, it's starting again. Apologies. Okay. Another science-based project that we do almost every year is the Stell Wagon Bank Marine Art Contest. We've been doing it for a long time with Anne Sracina and George Lyles from the NOAA Fisheries Service. Sometimes we get to go to the aquarium, and draw on site, and sometimes we've had to just rely on images that the kids were able to take on their own time at the aquarium. Again, the FEF would pay for us to take a bus to go down there, and so on years that we weren't able to do that, the kids would go on their own time. So with the projects that they make for the Stellwagen Bank contest, they are making works of art based on creatures that do live in Stellwagen Bank. So we use Google Maps and we look at where Stellwagen is in the ocean. You know, if I zoom in on Stellwagen Bank, it's just blue with like a dot, and then we zoom out and see where it is, and we talk about whale watches, et cetera, et cetera. And the students create works based on creatures that could or do live in that part of the world. Dr. Rebecca Gast is a friend of mine, and she is somebody that I have worked with for almost, well, we've been friends for a long time, but we've worked together almost the last 10 years on a bunch of different projects. I try to seek out people, you know, people in town. I'm always trying to find out what they do and if I can use them in my class. Like, oh, you do that? That's really interesting. Do you want to come to my class and talk to my students, or do you want to come on this field trip? Or Becky is somebody who's always willing to come and work with the students. And she's lectured at the high school. She's invited us to her lab and basically done a lot with our classroom over the years. She studies the abundance, I had to write this one down. She studies the abundance, diversity, distribution of microscopic plants and grazers in the ocean. That is what she does. She studies the creatures that live under the ice in the Antarctic, and also basically what the seals eat around here to figure out what's in their food or what's in their poop. She figures that out to figure out what's in the seals, to figure out what's in the microbes, et cetera, et cetera. Kind of like a grosser version of the powers of 10. So the first year we worked together, she brought images of one of her trips to the Antarctic to the classroom, and she talked to the students about where she went and what she does, and all of the things about her research. We then approached it from an artistic angle, and we looked at the work of Rockwell Kent. And I don't know if any of you have ever seen his work voyaging the Straits of Magellan. He did a lot of woodcuts and a lot of studies of going down to Tierra del Fuego. And it's pretty cool work. So we looked at that, we looked at her research, and then she shared a number of slides with us. So the advanced kids did portraits of icebergs. So these were large-scale linoleum cuts. They took a long time, but they really worked hard on them and just trying to figure out negative and positive space. So for me as an art teacher, trying to get them to figure out, again, negative and positive space and use of color and balance and composition, the elements and principles. They did portraits of penguins. And the Art 2 kids who are learning watercolor at that time, they did abstract portraits of microbes. So my interest as an art teacher was to get them to understand how to use Frisket, how to manipulate warms and cools, and they were able to create that work. So it was a huge art reception at Hui. It was really fun. The kids had a good time, and they sold their work. Whenever I try to encourage my kids to sell their artwork, and when they do, they keep the money because they're the artists. And so that's really neat to see that happen, pardon me. So another scientist that I've worked with a number of times over the years is Roger Hanlon. Dr. Hanlon's a professor of ecology and evolutionary biology at Brown, and he also has a lab here at the MBL. So I met Roger in 2013, I think, or 2014, and he invited us down to his lab. So he works with cuttlefish. It's called dynamic camouflage, studying how cuttlefish and other cephalopods can choose to change the color of their skin. It's a pretty awesome concept that cuttlefish can go near the seaweed and decide to be a different color. So he talks to the kids about that. And we went a few times over the years. So what happens is the kids go down to the lab. He lectures them on dynamic camouflage. We see the creatures, and then he shares images with us. So here's, again, Art 2 doing now abstracts of cuttlefish skin and squid skin. Another scientist that I've done some things with is Dr. Goldman. Dr. Goldman is, I texted his wife to make sure I got it right, professor of cell and developmental biology and professor of pulmonary medicine at Northwestern University, and he is also here at the MBL. Dr. Goldman came to meet with us over Zoom last year, which was pretty nice of him. So here is a typical scene of a teacher's end of Zoom. There's my classroom camera, and you usually would see, typically you see the kids' foreheads or the tops of their hairline, or just sometimes their name. Anyway, that was last year. So there's the talk that he gave and teaching them about cell structure. He gave us a research page. In Art 2, I have them practice doing research notes so they can get better at that sort of thing for the upper levels. So these are freshmen and sophomores doing research notes. And then here are their watercolor interpretations of Dr. Goldman's cells. So another project that we did, which was just science for the fun of it, Betsy Gladfelter from Hui approached me needing images for the Coonamessett River restoration. So at the same time, A.D. Colburn is my brother-in-law, and he was working on the Childs River restoration, and people needed pollinator images. And so I went to my students and I said, hey guys, we should do this. And so they said, sure. And so for them, I gave them readings to do so they could learn more about pollination. They had to read Sue Halperin's New Yorker article on monarch butterflies, Elizabeth Colbert's Stung, and watch the Coonamessett River restoration video. This was around the time that, well, actually earlier than that, but I try to give the kids things to research to learn more about what we're doing so they're not ignorant of what they're getting into, honestly. So each kid had to make 4 different images in different media. So again, as the art teacher, I was interested in them getting a hold of colored pencil, lino cut, frosted acetate, and we did ink pen and watercolor. They're not all represented here, but each kid did 4 images, and in the end, we had a digital image bank of about 180 or 170 images, which were then shared for free with the Coonamessett River people and Childs River and whoever else wanted them for pollinator imagery, and it's just free for them to use, so they were able to use them in their signage. The next group of ways that I bring science and art together is something that's actually Becky Gast's idea. She came to me one day and said, wouldn't it be fun if we did this? And I was like, yeah, that's a great idea. So she had the idea of door panels for the labs at Redfield. So every scientist who had a lab who volunteered for it it was a challenge for them to try and explain what they do to the students. So they had to come up with a description of what they do that was easy enough for the students to understand. And each student picked a different lab door. And then so they were about this big. They were big panels of them. And then the students shot their designs back to the scientists. So it was a back and forth, communication about representing what they do for science. And then we had a nice big art reception. And it was fun to see the teenagers and the scientists meet in person, because this was all done by email. Another project that we did during COVID, again, through Becky, she had the idea of doing illuminated letters. This was something that she actually started for herself just when she was bored in Antarctica at some point, I guess. So again, the scientists wrote to the students and said what letter they would like to use, what sort of imagery they would like to have, and then so it was like it was a fun project for them to have. It was a challenge of representing the scientists' work. And here is our Zoom art reception. So it was nice for me to see everybody's faces and not their foreheads. They were polite enough to do that. Excuse me, pardon me. So the third way that I do work with my students, trying to bring them to the sciences and bring science into the art room, is the bulk of what we do, and that is getting kids to approach the world as naturalists, again, to put their phones away and to sit and to look and to note. And basically, it's the same process as scientific observation, but it's the creative process. So let's see. So the scientific method, as most of you know, is observe, question. And there's different variations on it, Sir Francis Bacon, and draw conclusions, experiment, hypothesis. The creative process is pretty much the same thing. It just has different words. You're still looking at what you're trying to do. You're still reflecting on what it might be. You're still taking notes, and you're creating and you're presenting a physical artwork instead of, your research paper. This one on the upper right, I just want to talk about it in case I forget. For one of our projects, we did a flash installation of, those are paper mache turns up there. So the kids worked in pairs and we made about 30 pretend turns and we installed them outside the museums on the green one night. I've got great pictures of them in the dark. It looks so weird. Like, what is that? It's just a bunch of paper mache turns. No big deal. Let's see. So this is where the scientific collaboration comes in. I've got a lot of friends who are scientists, and so with these projects coming up, I'm able to reach out to them and say, "Hey, would you like to be involved in this?" So here, this is a pause for a minute. I had some alums, when I told them I was working on this project, they offered to send clips of, kind of testimonials, if you will. So here is Mary Negri, and that's her whale lino cut beneath her. And then Callum's charcoal and her seal. And anyway, so here's these kids.
Hi, I'm Mary Negri. I graduated in the class of 2015 from Falmouth High School. What I remember most about Miss Baker's field trips was the opportunity to experience the open spaces and natural resources of Cape Cod. Those trips are really what inspired me to pursue a career in the natural resources field. I now work as a park ranger in Maryland. But had it not been for those field trips, I probably never would have experienced what Cape Cod had to offer and thought of that as a career path. I was also on those field trips that I watched Miss Baker identify a barn swallow sitting on a telephone wire, and it inspired me to become an avid bird watcher. And as anyone who is open to field guide may know, artwork is all over field guides. Every field guide that I have has birds that are painted by an artist. So they're really important for helping to share that information with the public.
Is that feedback too much? I think I didn't follow one of Mike's directions to shut the noise off here. Well, that's Mary with her adorable ranger outfit. And here's another one. Hopefully this doesn't have feedback.
Hi everyone, my name's Callan Small and I graduated from Falmouth High School in 2015. I was a disciple of Miss Jane Baker, and I was lucky enough to participate in some of the projects which merged science and art. One very special day, which I still think about all the time, was a trip we took to P-Town. We walked through the dunes and we did some plein air painting of seals on the National Seashore. It was such an incredible day. I mean, the weather was perfect. And I just remember feeling so inspired by the nature and so invigorated. It really gave new life to our paintings. Another project I got to work on was the Antarctica project, where we chose subjects from photos that the scientists had taken while they were doing research in Antarctica. And I remember I picked a photo of a penguin, and at the end of the project, we got to do an art show at Hui. And I actually sold my first painting. It was of that penguin. It was a lino cut print. And I remember thinking, wow, someone wants to buy this silly little picture of a penguin. But when I was able to actually talk to the scientist, it reminded them of that experience. You know, it was a penguin that they saw, that they researched, and it was just really special. And I feel so grateful for those experiences. And if you're wondering, am I still a nature lover? Yes. Am I still an artist? Yes. And I can thank that to Miss Jane Baker and all of the other teachers who supported us during that time.
So, there are other videos in this that I really hope that, we didn't really, anyway, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Okay, so here are the big projects. Lauren Kenny is the AP Lit teacher. She and I worked together for a lot of years. The SEAL project that I got a grant from the FEF for in, I think, 2014, we were about to go on that project, and that year, a lot of her students, it was like the Jets and the Sharks of Falmouth High School. The AP Lit kids thought the AP Art kids were a joke, and the AP Art kids thought the AP Lit kids were, ugh. And they were really mean to each other. And so it was annoying Lauren and I that each one of them didn't see the other one's strengths. So we decided the best remedy was to make them work together. So I included Lauren and her gang in my project. I wrote to the FEF and I said, can we make it better? And they said, yeah. So basically, in their shared discomfort, that was the year that we decided to make all of the art students have to write poems based on the day, and all of the lit students had to create artwork based on the day. And they were miserable, and it was great because it made them see that nobody is better than somebody else. Being a great writer is just as important as being a great artist, and vice versa. So basically, again, with this reference to the scientific method, they research what we were doing, they observe what's going on. In some cases, we've meditated, we've had them meditate. We had somebody come in to teach them how to meditate. My friend Tammy came in, she's awesome at that. And, John Muir, the book that I just flashed up there, John Muir Law, no relation to actual John Muir. That's an excellent book if you ever want to help somebody figure out how to do nature studies. But observe, reflect, write, create. In the end, they combined their art and writing into something called a broadside. So here's Madison's broadside on the right. Elizabeth Bradfield is a poet. She came and worked with us to learn how to do that. All of their sketchbooks, they had to balance art and writing. Your sketchbook pages have to be works of art in and of themselves, and you have to do the research to learn about what you're doing. So here's examples of sketchbook pages and research pages of the students. Here, everybody is out in the world observing on the different field trips. Basically, this Peterson Farm, this is Monomoy, this is Brewster, Cuttyhunk, all sorts of places. I do want to give a shout out at this moment to all of the great chaperones that have ever come with us on field trips. Some people love being chaperones. Some people look at me like I have 6 heads when I say, hey, you want to chaperone this field trip? We're going to go look at seals. They're like, no, that sounds awful. But some people, like Judy Fenwick or Dan Dowdy or Becky Lash, there's so many great people that come with us, and the kids, they're having fun, and the kids can say that they're having fun. On the field trips, they have to take notes, again, balancing art and writing. You have to write down the time of day, you have to write down where you were, what was going on, what things you noticed, because you need that information for later on when we force you to write a poem to go with your artwork. Poor Logan, she was so miserable. She did not want to write that poem, and finally, in the end, the poem that she wrote, it was the third snake, sunbathing, hiding in leaves of brown and gold. Distracted from our departure, we edged in closer, black and brown like wet soil, with a thin tan line, black eyes, watching us wonder. Isn't that beautiful? Yeah, and she did not think she was a poet, and those were all directly from her field trip notes. So, and then after we go on the trip, so we do all the projects, we go on the science fair, we publish little books using a company called Blurb, we make postcards and invite people to art shows, things like that. So here's the SEAL project, the initial project that we took everybody on to be miserable together that I mentioned a moment ago. This is at High Head Beach in Truro, and it's one of the places that Becky Gass does her research. So she was the impetus for this. She came and talked to the kids about what she does, and we went there. In the end, they made large-scale charcoal drawings, paintings, all sorts of things. We made an enormous 14-foot long, 7-foot wide seal out of commercial fish netting, and that was a little bit of a political statement. It was also a challenge that I decided. The guy at Aubuchon told me it wasn't possible. When I told him what I wanted to do, he was like, you can't do that. Yes, I can. So the kids made an armature out of trash bags, and that's fish netting dipped in marine epoxy and zip ties. It was awesome. Another project that we did, basically On Common Ground was the name of it. I actually named this talk after that because I liked the title I made up and I used it again. Marla Isaac is this fantastic woman. She's got all sorts of birds. She brought live birds for the kids to come and see. And so they were able to draw live birds in person. We also went to Harvard and drew all the dead birds, but at least they were close up and you didn't get them off the internet. We went to Peterson Farm, and here's some of the works from that project. Tidal was the name of a project that Lauren and I did. Again, at this point, we went to Cuttyhunk and Penakees. We were studying migrators. Sorry, I'm checking my notes. And so phenology, basically the concept of like things that pass through this world that you don't even notice. So the horseshoe crab migration and the staging of the terns, et cetera, et cetera. That's where the secret terns came from that I showed earlier. So we brought 52 kids out to Cuttyhunk and Penakees. David Vieira came with us, and let's see, Carolyn Mostello came with us. She's Department of Fish and Wildlife, And in the end, there's the students there with Dave in the chambers. They got their picture taken. We all won an award. It was lovely for the kids. They made some beautiful work, and again, we published a book from that experience. Another one after that, zoom in, zoom out. This is when we just basically kept going with the same theme of looking at things and concentrating on what you were doing. Elizabeth Bradfield came and worked with us again. Here are the different things they had to read and see to get ready for the project. Again, taking really good notes. We're really into really good notes because taking really good notes forces you to take what you're looking at and make a plan on that moment instead of just kind of writing stuff loosely and then you can't remember what you were trying to do. So here's some of the work from that project. We had etchings, we had paintings, we had watercolors. Again, we had broadsides. And Karen Ronaldo hosted us at her gallery. There's Lauren there. And that was another really special year for the kids. So every year it's basically giving the kids a chance to work together, work in something that they're not necessarily comfortable with, but it's exciting and new for them. They're making art, they're writing poetry, and then when they show it in public and strangers actually come up to them and say, "Oh, I love your painting," they're like, "What?" Nobody but their mom has ever said that before, or me, But when a stranger says it, it's like, wow, maybe it is pretty good. Here's more of the broadsides from that year. So they did some really beautiful work with that. And let me see. The last one I'm going to tell you about is the one that we're doing right now. So this one's only halfway through because we just started it in September. This is a project that we planned a couple years ago, but then with COVID hit, we couldn't do the project. There were no field trips. We couldn't do anything. So we were able to do it in September. We went at it great guns. Basically went down to Woods Hole at first. And let me make sure I tell you about all the people that we were with. Sorry. Okay, so let's see. Art 2 went to Pennikeese and Cuddy Hunk with Jim Newman and Cricket. And so that's the small group up here in the upper left, and then the group on the bottom. And then the bigger group went to Woods Hole at first to work with Javier Lorette from the Ecosystems Lab here, Rebecca Gass, Jed Goldstone, Michelle Sharrow from the Hui Biology Department, and oh my goodness, Woodwell Climate Research Center. I don't want to say Mrs. Goldstone. She's going to Heather Goldstone. Talk to them. She's going to kill me about climate change. So the whole project was about climate change. The kids all had to do readings and watch videos and learn about different things about what's going on with climate on Cape Cod. Again, Becky Lash and Dan Dowdy came along as chaperones. So for their research pages, they had to read the Town of Falmouth Coastal Resiliency Report. I got it from online and I kind of pieced it up for them, and different poems and different articles. So here's some of their notes from their readings. Here's some of the day in Woods Hole. There's Javier talking to them, and Becky and Jed and Michelle. And Rob Reynolds took us out on his boat, and they did tows for eelgrass and things like that. Then some of the kids went to Chatham and Fort Hill, and we went to Monomoy, where we had been a few years prior for the Zoom In, Zoom Out project. This picture in the middle, where the kids are just kind of standing there and there's a fence, that's because the whole thing fell off. They lost a few acres of land in that spot. So where I just had students 2 or 3 years ago walking through the path and down the stairs, it's not there anymore. There's just a fence that says danger. So they were able to look at it, but we couldn't go much further. Basically, we went from there to the fish pier at Chatham, and Rick Nye, the manager of the Monomoy National Wildlife Refuge, was able to talk to the kids about the barrier beach coming down and what's happening with coastal erosion and things like that. So these are all things that are happening to Cape Cod that they don't necessarily pay attention to in their daily lives because they might be catching up on Criminal Minds on Netflix or talking to their friends about something. They don't necessarily pay attention to the fact that Cape Cod is, has sea level rise and coastal erosion and things like that. Field trip notes from the trip, the different trips the kids went on. And here is another testimonial. Hopefully we don't have feedback again from this computer, but I'm going to do it anyway because Madison did a good job.
Honestly, writing things down and being able to visually see your hands like write out what you're thinking, definitely helps you remember a lot of things we learned. Like specifically, I remember one of the scientists from our Hui field trip talking about how chemicals that we emit into the air end up specifically kind of pooling together in the Arctic, and that actually ends up into the fat of some of the seals. And that just was like really interesting for me to learn, but it was also really helpful to write it down and also pair it to something that I drew. So I drew like a little seal with some of the facts that we learned.
So that's her sketchbook page on the left there. And here's Drea talking quickly about the art that she made.
I'm doing this painting based on our trip to Woods Hole in October. This was from when we were dredging near Hadley's Harbor, and we were learning about all like the dying eelgrass and how it's affecting our climate and how it's affecting life on Cape Cod.
And sorry. Here's Casey printing. She did a large-scale linoleum print of Falmouth, actually. Representing the climate process of printing in the classroom. And lastly, oh, stop it. There. Okay. So here's some of the work that they've produced so far from the trips that we've just gone on. These are some of the seniors who've finished some things, and I was able to grab shots of their work this week. But this project's just starting out now. The AP Lit kids have been coming to my classroom to try and make art. We have something called Clipper Time at the high school where they can come in and meet with me, and then my kids can go meet with Lauren if they need to do work on their poems. And we'll continue the process of creating art and writing in response to these experiences. So I haven't covered all of it, but I've covered a lot of it, and I'm sorry if any of it was confusing, and hopefully it was enlightening. And does anybody have any questions about anything? Thank you. So broadsides, Elizabeth Bradfield, she runs something called the Broadsided Press. It's actually online. You can find it online. And she is a poet based here on the Cape, and she's the poet in residence at Brandeis University. And she's so kind to come to our classroom, and she talks to the kids about what that is. And so basically, it's a single piece of paper where your artwork and your writing are combined on the paper. So it's a traditional form that she explained it to the kids. It was handed out at like public hangings, back in the day. You'd print up something and, everybody was there to see somebody get hung and like, oh, hey, check out my poem that I wrote. So it's a very old tradition, that now is used for nice things and not for hangings, but they did. Yes, thank you. Thanks.
I think you're amazing.
Thank you.
I know I'm practically in tears. This is great. I wonder if you could tell everyone where maybe these books are at the library, at Woods Hole Library, because they are magnificent.
Yes, thank you. The FEF paid for the FEF paid for copies to be held at the Woods Hole Library, and I believe at the Falmouth Library. I've got a little bit of COVID fog, but I'm pretty sure they're there. And they're at the Falmouth High School. And then we also do have a link where, so this is a tangent, but at the same time, T-Ticket second graders did some of the same projects at the same time. So we have little kid versions of the books and big kid versions. So for the high school kids, people were able to purchase the book through Blurb. Nobody made any money on it. It's just you would purchase it through the cost of it. I don't have that link here or on the top, but I can get it to you. So you can purchase it. Blurb is an online publishing company, so you can order it through them. It exists in their world. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. People our age are fond of believing, at least, that that education is exponentially more difficult than it was years ago. You've been teaching for a while. Mm-hmm. I wonder if you would comment on that, and especially in light of the fact that you appear to be approaching this problem head on by making education much more engaging than it was when I was in that situation.
Well, we were speaking about this earlier at dinner, the irony of the fact that not necessarily in Falmouth, but in many towns, the first thing when test scores go down or when budgets are low, oh, let's get rid of the art and music programs. That's a waste of money. And actually, that's a lot of the programs that are actually holding many kids in school. And another thing is that when towns are, when schools are saying, oh, come to, Springfield High School, we have a great art and music program, so it's strange how towns will promote their programs, but at the same time, many towns are getting rid of them because they're like, oh, we need higher MCAS scores. Let's hire more tutors. And that's not what's happening in Falmouth. Falmouth has a great program, but it's sad that in a lot of places in this country, it is treated as, so many people will say, oh, like, oh, I can't draw a line. Mr. Ford, I love him so much. He was a math teacher at the high school, and he'd see me in the hallway, and he'd be like, oh, I got to show you my drawing of the snake going up a hill. And that was his running joke, and it was funny, but at the same time, like, no one would ever, like, say, like, oh, I could never drive a foot, or I could never read a page. Like, people don't say things like that because I think people get defensive. Not that Mr. Ford was defensive, but I'm just saying many people get defensive about when you're drawing or when you're making art, it's right in front of you. My first year of teaching, I was this like rosy cheeked little person from Falmouth, like, I'm gonna make a difference. And I'm up in Boston with these, awesome, pretty tough kids who didn't, they got put in an art class. They hadn't been in an art class in forever. And this kid, Gary, was kind of slumped over. And I'm like, oh, come on, you can do it. It's gonna be great. And he said to me, and it stuck with me forever, Miss, you don't understand. In math class, the only person that knows I suck is my teacher, but here, everybody can see that I suck. And I was like, oh, like, because I knew how to make art, and I was 23 or 24 at the time, and I'm like, wow, I'm so sorry. And so, it taught me to just not think like everything's sunshine and roses for everybody. Art making makes people uncomfortable because, yeah, if you can't draw that perfect apple with the leaf and the stem next to the kid next to you in preschool, they're going to be like, what's that? Is that a polar bear? Like, no, it's an apple. I'm like, oh, God. So I don't know if I answered your question. I think I just kind of talked at it like this.
You gave us some nice examples of art kids doing literature and literature kids doing art. Science has a long tradition of field notes incorporating art into going way back through history. What about the science kids in the school? What sort of art exposure do they get?
Well, everybody at Falmouth High School can take whatever classes they want to, but as far as a project, like where at one point we did bring AP Bio into one of those projects because we thought let's bring AP, we thought it was a great idea, let's bring AP Bio in. There were so many kids in AP Bio that it made every trip had 2 or 3 buses, and it got exponentially. We pulled it off, but it needs to be a more manageable size. So yes, I should do a project reaching out to one of the science teachers, but I think other people should also do that too. Like science teachers should be, I don't know. I'm happy to do a whole bunch more projects. I'll be teaching forever. It's going to be great. But yes, it should happen in other disciplines. We've done work with history projects and with other projects, and I have, like as you've seen, I've done science projects with my kids. But as far as reaching out to other science classes, I regret I haven't done that yet, but I will. Okay.
We have a question from our virtual audience.
What is the potential for expansion nationally? This idea has such legs.
Oh, that's lovely. I have no idea. I do speak at the National Art Education Conference sometimes, and Lauren and I are scheduled to go there in March. Again, thanks to the FEF. I feel like an infomercial, like I should have like NUC. But so in those conferences, we do speak about these sorts of projects, but again, it's art teachers talking to art teachers. So I don't really know how to take this at a national level. Maybe somebody will steal this idea and make lots of money. Here's hoping. I don't know.
So Jane, we have time for one more question.
I would like you to relay the story that you told me once about how the city of Boston participated in an art project with your students. Large woodcuts?
Oh, the steamroller printing? Well, it wasn't science related, but it was my first year of teaching. My professor at Mass College of Art, she got some of us to go over to the school and work with the students doing large woodcuts with routers and plywood and giant rollers, and then the city donated a steamroller to do we printed these large prints in the parking lot. It was pretty magnificent. It was these huge things. It was pretty impressive. It was fun. Yes, yeah.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you everyone for coming this evening.
Thank you.